This is the Holy Gospel according to St. John, the 9th chapter. As Jesus walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's work might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I'm in the world, I am the light of the world." When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with his saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. Then he went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but it's someone like him." He kept saying, "I'm the man." But they kept asking him, "Then how are your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, said to me, 'Go wash in the Siloam, and go to Siloam and wash.' Then I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Well, where is he?" He said, "I don't know." They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also began to ask him how he received his sight. He said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, then I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner perform such signs?" And they were divided. So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened." He said, "I think he's a prophet." The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but we don't know how it was that now he sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he's of age, he will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were actually afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus as the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He's of age, ask him." So for the second time they called the man who had been born blind and said to him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner." He answered, "I don't know whether he's a sinner. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see." They said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I've told you already, and you wouldn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" Then they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, "Here's an astonishing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes? We know that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." They answered him, "You were born entirely in sins. Are you now trying to teach us?" And they drove him out. Jesus heard that they had driven him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "Who is he? Tell me so that I may believe in him." Jesus said to him, "You've seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshipped him. Jesus said, "I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near him heard this and said to him, "Surely we are not blind, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would not have sin. But now that you say, 'We see,' your sin remains." This is the gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
God's grace, mercy, and peace be yours this day through Christ, our Savior and Lord. Amen. There's a theory that all the different church denominations began when the people who were healed of blindness got to talking with each other. There are several different accounts of blind people being healed by Jesus. And they each happen a little bit differently, which is a fascinating thing. For some, the healing came from a simple touch of faith. All Jesus needed to do was just touch them in some way, and they were healed. For example, in Matthew chapter 9, he touched their eyes, saying, "According to your faith, be it done to you." And in Matthew chapter 20, and Jesus in pity touched their eyes, and immediately they recovered their sight and followed him. A simple touch, that's all it took. Another proudly boasted that he had enough faith so that Jesus didn't even have to touch him at all. In Mark chapter 10, Jesus said to him, "Go your way. Your faith has made you well." No reference, no word of Jesus having to touch his eyes at all. It kind of happened at a distance. The healing seemed to happen from far off. Another meekly exclaimed that Jesus not only touched him twice, but also spit on his eyes in order for him to see clearly. Matthew chapter 8. And he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. And when he had spit on his eyes and laid hands on him, he asked him, "Do you see anything?" And finally, the story we heard today from John chapter 9, he must have had a real serious case of blindness. Because not only did it take spit, but he had to make mud, massage it in, and put it on the guy's eye. And then the guy had to go and wash in a special pool. Again, from John chapter 9. Having said these things, he spat on the ground, made blood with the saliva, then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud, and said to him, "Go and wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he washed and came back able to see. Since each one of these thought that his healing was miraculous, was a true healing of God, he figured that would be the best kind of healing. They had it each right. And so they started arguing with one another, and they divided into separate groups. The Spittites and non-Spittites, Muddites and non-Muddites, Touchites and non-Touchites, and hence denominations were born. I think it is interesting, though, to compare the healing stories and realize how they are each different. And what that says to me is that healing doesn't just happen in one singular way. What it says to me is that each of those people needed a different kind of experience with Jesus in order to undergo healing. For some, for them to have this kind of powerful, life-changing connection, this relationship, to build this kind of trust, and for them to have a whole different outlook on the world, all it took was a passing word. Just a wave. "Your faith has made you well. You're great." For others, they need to actively participate in the healing for them to recognize God at work. If you're not actively going to a special pool and washing yourself and participating in the healing, somehow it doesn't seem real. So I think God works with each of us, depending on who we are, depending on what we might need to be changed, to be affected, to recognize God's love in a new and powerful way. There's some interesting things going on in the backstory here that we may not recognize. It did mention that this healing took place on the Sabbath. And I kind of think that Jesus might be poking at the Pharisees a little bit when he's performing this healing, because it's the one instance where it says Jesus spit in the mud. Why did he make mud? That sounds really messy. Sounds like a weird way to undergo healing. There's mud in your eye. Maybe that's where the expression came from. I haven't looked that up. That's a whole other thing. But what he had to do was to massage that dirt, to knead it together. Kneading is one of the 39 activities that is forbidden on the Sabbath. You cannot do that on the Sabbath. Jesus is specifically breaking the rules, breaking the law of the day. And there's kind of been this ongoing tension between Jesus and the Pharisees. What's more important, the keeping of Sabbath law or somebody getting the help that they need? And Jesus continues to default to helping the people in need. He outright says to them at one point, "Hey, if your ox fell in a well and it happened to be the Sabbath, you wouldn't wait till the next day to fish them out. They'd drown. You'd pull them out that day because the ox needs help. Why are people any worse off than the oxen? Come on, get a clue. If people need help, help them." The law was originally given as a gift to help people figure out how to get along, to help people to live well with one another. The law was originally given to help facilitate healing, to help keep some order and create some fairness and create some boundaries and some structure for people, but then it became so rigid that it was being used to hurt people. Jesus says that's not right. So here again, he is demonstrating, I'm breaking the law because somebody needs help. And that's what's most important. That's what really counts here. There's also, we're in the Gospel of John, and whenever you're reading the Gospel of John, you've got to remember that it's operating on multiple levels. We've got a literal level, blind man's sight, but then we've got kind of this symbolic level. And that's where the irony comes in. It's the blind guy who is able to recognize Jesus for who he is. He's able to see the Messiah. And I love this response. They're like, well, what happened? He's like, I don't know. All I know is that I was blind and now I can see. That's all you need to know, isn't it? What more do you need? I mean, it happened. I don't know how, but it happened. There's a lot of stuff in life that we just take on faith that way. But for some reason, they couldn't accept that. And he just kept coming saying, it happened. I know it happened. That's all that matters. And I like the fact that he says, they ask him, well, was this guy a sinner? Well, I don't know about sin. That's a whole other realm. Honestly, I don't care if he was a sinner. That's the subtext I hear here. I knew I was blind, and then this guy came along. Maybe he was a sinner, but now I can see. So all that matters is the effect of the activity, the result, the experience of that individual. Maybe he was a sinner. Who knows? That's not up for me to decide. And frankly, it doesn't concern me a whole lot. What did concern me was that I couldn't see, and now I can. Cool. That's what counts. As Lutherans, we have a rich history of theology. We've got incredible documents stating what we believe. What is the nature of the church? What does communion mean? Luther wrote a whole lot, and a lot of great people, great theologians and writers have written since then. And if you're interested in learning more about that, I can definitely direct you to some wonderful reading. But honestly, our theology only gets us so far. Our theology may be important and it's wonderful reading, but in the end, it's just words on a page. We can expound theology until we're blue in the face, but realistically, most people aren't connected with a living God through theological works. And explaining to them the doctrine of the Trinity isn't going to necessarily change their life. So the real question is, what do people experience? We just had our council retreat last weekend, and we were talking about the future of our church. And it's always kind of a question, I think, in the background of the church council, and I think of all of us, when we have people come and visit our church, what do they experience when they walk through our doors? We have on our sign that we're the church on the hill with a heart. Are we living that? I hear periodically from folks that they really do experience that here, and I'm delighted when I hear that. But I think it's true not just of our congregation, but of each of us individually as well. We can call ourselves a church, we can call ourselves individually, we can call ourselves Christians. But the question is, what do we live? What do we practice? The lesson today, I think, demonstrates that words only get you so far. But in the end, it's the effect of how we live. It's our practice that really makes a powerful impact on the people around us. Probably heard the story about road rage. There was a man being tailgated by a stressed out woman on a busy road. And the light in front of him turned yellow, and he did the right thing. He actually decided to stop rather than gunning it and trying to beat the light. Well, the woman behind him was in such a hurry, and she was furious. She was mad as could be, and she had to slam on her brakes, missing her chance to get through the intersection. She dropped her cell phone and the makeup in the process. She was in mid-rant when she heard a tap on her window, and she looked up into the face of a very serious police officer. The officer ordered her to exit the car with her hands up. He took her to the police station where she was searched, fingerprinted, photographed, and placed in a holding cell. After a couple of hours, the policeman approached the cell and opened the door. She was escorted back to the booking desk where the arresting officer was waiting with her personal effects. He said, "I'm sorry for the mistake. You see, I pulled up behind your car while you were blowing your horn, flipping off the guy in front of you, cussing a blue streak at him, and I noticed on the car the 'What Would Jesus Do' bumper sticker, the Choose Life license plate holder, the 'Follow Me to Sunday School' bumper sticker, and the chrome-plated Christian fish emblem. Naturally, I assumed you had stolen the car." practice? How do we live? Do we live the message that we claim to live by? Do we demonstrate the level of kindness and patience that Jesus teaches us? Some people of faith get caught up in the question of who's right and who's wrong, who's good and bad, who's going to heaven and who's going to the other place. But really, in the end, every last one of us are dependent on the grace and forgiveness of God. Some people feel like they shouldn't be here, that if they hear the thing that if they walk through the doors, the roof would cave in. But in the end, all of us are dependent on God's grace. And so the question is, how do we live? How do we live? Not with judgment, hopefully, but, we really have those choices all the time to demonstrate kindness or not. To be caring and thoughtful to the people around us or not. To think of others and give of ourselves or not. How will we live? For the hungry and thirsty, the one thing they know is whether they have received food and drink. And honestly, I don't know a whole lot of folks that are really hungry that are too worried about where it comes from or what the motivations might be behind it. They just know that, man, I was starving. I couldn't think straight. I was so hungry. And then I got something to eat. And the world was different after that. It felt like a new person after a good meal. So we need to be asking what will speak the loudest to the people around us. What will make that kind of impact about the love that God has shown us and how we can share it with others? What will make a difference? We're not perfect. Of course we're not perfect. Heck, even Jesus was accused of breaking all the rules. But that blind guy, in the end, he was changed. He recognized that in that exchange, he experienced God because somebody stopped and noticed him and showed kindness to him. He said, man, my world is different now because somebody cared. This week, in fact, I'm sure before the day is out, you will have those opportunities to practice patience, to put someone else before yourself. And in doing so, you are bringing God that much more into the world and that much closer to people around you. As people of faith, we are referred to as light bearers, those who bring light into the world. A couple weeks ago in our Wednesday service, we talked about how the last official part of our church service is the sending. That the message we have received is not just intended to stay here in this building, but that all of us are sent out from here to bring God's presence and God's light and hope to the people we encounter throughout the week. So may your eyes be opened this day to the love that God has for you. And may you be blessed this week in bringing that